Hi, I'm Jolie,
And I'm Charlie.
and welcome to Teatime Talks, the Language Addict's weekly podcast to help you learn English. Now, Charlie, happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
When this goes out, it is currently the 11th of February, and on the Saturday, it will be Valentine's Day, the 14th of February. Now, I thought we could do a podcast all about Valentine's Day in the UK. What are the customs? What is the history? And also, where does Valentine's Day come from? Why
Great
why do we
question.
celebrate it? Because I personally knew that it was to do with Saint Valentine, but that was literally it.
Yeah, I honestly have zero clue. Again, I know about the saint, but I don't know how this holiday originated and how it spread around the world, even.
I was very intrigued when I did my research, so I thought I would go through my research with you, get your opinions, see if you know. Now, you did Latin, which encompassed culture.
Hmm.
Did that include anything to do with like Roman gods and
Yeah, it
goddesses?
did, yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure from my research, Saint Valentine is Roman, or at least. Do you know what? We'll go through it. So, we'll start off from kind of the very beginning,
Yeah.
as one would say. Who was Saint Valentine? Now, it says that the historical Saint Valentine is actually kind of unknown. There's not very many reliable facts on the guy at all, and from my research, it says that the only kind of confident known things about him was that he was a martyr who was put to death for his Christian faith, probably around the year 270, and likely on the 14th of February, which is
Hmm.
why the date is commemorated as his feast or holy day. Something which I just didn't clock, even though I knew it was to do with Saint Valentine's Day, is that Saint Valentine's Day or Valentine's Day, sorry, is essentially the same as Saint Patrick's Day or Saint George's Day,
Yeah, I guess
Be-
that's true.
because essentially it's a day celebrating saints. So like, there's no real difference between St. Patrick's Day, St. George's Day, St. David's Day to Valentine's Day. It's the same thing, it's celebrating a saint. It
Yeah.
just happens that Valentine's Day has kind of become its own thing, one should say.
Yeah, it has definitely evolved because I feel like if you ask the average person, they might not even know that is a saint's day or.
No, which is very. I mean, I guess some people might say it's the same as Christmas, how it's become commercialized, but we'll talk about that in a little while on. So, early Christian sources actually identify three saints called Valentine who made the ultimate sacrifice for their faith. The only thing known about one is that he died in North Africa and was martyred alongside numerous companions, and the other two Valentines were martyred in or near Rome and have claims to be the saint commemorated on the 14th of February.
Hmm.
The first was a priest who was executed and buried outside the walls of Rome on the Flaminian Way. I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm saying that right. One of the highways, no, one of the highways that radiated from the city, and the other was a bishop of Terni, a small city around 60 miles north of Rome. After being martyred at Terni, the bishop's followers moved his relics, physical remains, to Rome for burial. The confusion over who the real true Saint Valentine ultimately was settled by the Bollandists, who were a group of scholarly Jesuit priests and the ultimate authority on saints, apparently. And they detected so many similarities between the two Valentines that were martyred in Rome that they concluded they were in fact the same person.
Interesting.
So that is kind of the history of Saint Valentine. So he was essentially this religious martyr who believed so deeply in his Christian faith that he was killed for it. There's a lot of information to do with where this Saint Valentine's like bones and um, remains were moved and became relics and lots of that. But it says actually that the devotion to this holy martyr, as he was called, across the Christian world kind of spread around the 8th century. So it kind of became a cult. They
Hmm.
described it as a cult, this devotion to him, and it reached England no later than the 8th century. His 14th February feast day was observed in churches great and small through evidence from English monastic calendars of feast days, and ambiguity about Valentine's precise identity persisted well into the late Middle Ages because he was sometimes described as a priest and other times as a bishop.
Mm.
So, medieval times, this kind of devotion and this worship of this saint who died for his religion had moved to England. So, even back in the 8th century, Valentine's Day was being celebrated in England, which is kind of insane to think of.
It is, and it's crazy how much it's changed since.
So, so we've learned about Saint Valentine, and we know that it's already come over to England and has become some sort of festivity. But I guess the main question is, why is he associated with love?
Mm.
Do you have any idea of why?
No, I don't actually. No idea.
So, there's a whole story to do with why he's associated with love. And the main one is claims that Valentine performed secret Christian marriages in defiance of a ban on marriage imposed by the Empress Claudius II from 268 to 270. But there's apparently no historical foundation to these claims, so
Right.
this is kind of just a myth, a claim. Um, and it's kind of a misunderstanding of the ban. So what actually happened was Claudius gave soldiers who weren't allowed to marry the rights of married men,
Mm.
which is where the misunderstanding came from. There's also no historical basis to the associated legend that Valentine passed clandestine notes between jailed Christian lovers, which was also a myth as to why Valentine's Day is celebrated. Some modern scholars have claimed that the association between the 14th of February and romance is actually an ancient Roman fertility cult called Lupercalia.
Oh, I know that one.
The Lupercalia celebration was held in mid-February and according to Oxford Classical Dictionary included odd rites. Two youths, naked except for loincloths, ran around one of ancient Rome's 7 hills, striking bystanders, especially young women, with animal skin thongs.
As you do.
Mental statement. Pregnant women thought this would result in the birth of a healthy child. The Pope suppressed the cult at the end of the 5th century, by which time St. Valentine's feast on the 14th of February was already well established, and Rome a firmly Christian city. Whether the cult's association with fertility was transferred to St. Valentine's feast is open to question. I guess fertility and romance lead hand in hand, maybe?
It was definitely a big thing in Rome. Just it's been like 7 years since I've even thought about Rome, but I remember we had to learn about all the different gods and things like that, and they definitely like all the gods were sort of like you'd pray to them for one specific thing or like a few specific things. Like there was a god of love, the god of fertility, the house, and things like that. And so it doesn't surprise me that they would get something along those lines back then because they had so many kind of like superstitions and like thing or like gods they'd pray to for things like that.
Mm.
And it's interesting that they had a similar thing around the same time in February as well.
Yeah, so this one, that kind of origin story doesn't have direct links to St. Valentine's Day as the feast day of St. Valentine, but it can be believed as kind of some of the origin, maybe not sort of first inklings of romance, but I guess it makes sense
Mm.
because after so many years, so much time, those kind of festivities, if they're around the same time, they probably all get blended into one,
Yeah,
really.
definitely. Like, there's a lot of Roman ones that I remember learning about. Like, they had one called Saturnalia, which was basically like the day before Christmas or a few days before Christmas. And obviously there's like other origins as well, but I do think it's interesting when there tends to be a celebration on a certain date and it changes and evolves, but it's still kind of a similar time and a similar theme.
Mm. So it actually is stated though that the association between romance and the 14th of February dates back to at least the late Middle Ages. So in the 14th century, Geoffrey Chaucer, who was medieval England's greatest poet, and the name Chaucer is very well known,
Yeah.
observed that birds engaged in courtship rites on 14th of February. So essentially, he noticed that for some reason birds were mating on the 14th of February. And he wrote, "For this was on St. Valentine's Day, when every bird comes there to choose his mate."
Okay.
Which is kind of, you know,
Cute.
cute. It's a nice beginning of story. Um, So humans were soon emulating these lovebirds. John Lydgate, a monk at Bury St Edmund's Abbey in the 15th century, wrote that on St Valentine's Day, it was custom of Englishmen to look and search Cupid's calendar and choose their choice of romantic partner with great affection. That is quotes.
Right.
The near contemporary letters of the Paston family, Norfolk gentry, record people choosing Valentines. So basically, the 15th century, people had associated the 14th of February with the day of love, that people came together. Not now, it's more associated with actual already established couples, but then it was like the day to find love,
Yeah.
more so than the day to celebrate your love already. It was a day to find love. So in the 15th century, people began using that day to choose their Valentines, to choose their lovers. Um, Although the Protestant Reformation of the mid 16th century led to the purging of St. Valentine's feast from the official calendar of the Church of England, the day's association with love and romance persisted. Here we have the Protestant Reformation, which got rid of a lot of things.
Yeah.
A very turbulent time of history. In a So even though it was banned, it lived on, because you can't
Of
just
course.
ban something and just think people will forget about it. Let's be
No.
honest. Like,
They'll
even
still do it. They just won't tell you about it.
exactly, like, even if you take it off the calendar, people are still going to be like, "Oh, it's this day every year. We always go and do this." Like,
Mm.
it's a bit stupid. But retrospect is great, I guess.
Yeah.
So in 1668, James, Duke of York and heir of Charles II, gave his mistress, Lady Frances Stuart, a jewel worth the enormous sum of £800 as a Valentine's gift. The choosing of Valentines by people of more humble status is also documented around this time. So this is essentially when Valentine's becomes not just like a rich people thing.
Yeah.
It becomes a everyone can kind of do it, which I guess is the fact for a lot of things. Like if
Mm.
you think about Boxing Day,
Yeah.
when we did the podcast on that, the whole kind of term of Boxing Day, by some claims, is when rich people gave poor people like boxes full of what was it, like boxes of treats, or
Something like that, yeah.
it was basically a present from the rich to the poor, and it was kind of the first introduction of like luxury from a day of luxury from the rich going towards the poor. So
Yeah, which is interesting because I actually had a very similar celebration in Rome as well. I think Saturnalia actually was that one where basically they would switch roles for the day and the masters would become the slaves and the slaves would become the masters.
that is the Feast of Fools,
Ah.
which is one of the, or argued to be one of the origins of
Oh.
pantomime. Okay, so also in the medieval um, era, Valentine's Day became a time when people draw lots to determine their Valentines.
That's strange. That is very strange.
So it was a game, in some cases, played at social gatherings where names drawn from a container to determine temporary romantic matches. Over time, these pairings were formalised with small gifts or letters, early precursors to the modern Valentine's Day card, which is a strange concept to.
It is a little bit, yeah. I mean, I feel like these days Valentine's is really a thing for established couples. Like, it definitely kind of used to be more of a thing of like you find someone who you like and give them something and hopefully they like it. But I feel like it's mainly changed into just an established thing. So it's interesting that it used to be used as more like a courtship thing.
There's also I wanted to know as well, very when I was doing my research as well, there was also one custom that kept coming up a lot, which I wanted to know, which is a Welsh tradition of Welsh love spoons. So, and it's a centuries old tradition where intricately carved wooden spoons were presented as tokens of affections, and it actually dates back to at least 1667. And while they're popular for Valentine's Day, they're traditionally central to the Welsh equivalent of Valentine's Day, which is St. Dwynwen's Day. I don't know if I said that correctly, which is celebrated on January 25th. But I thought that was a very cute custom. I'd never heard of that before.
No, I've also never heard about that one, but yeah, it's interesting that they have a sort of different version of it, I guess.
I also think the fact that it's a spoon is very cute.
It is, yeah. I mean, don't get spoons given to you too often.
Why not? I feel like we should.
I agree.
Um, but modern Valentine's Day, like many modern Valentine's Day, like many British traditions and customs, kind of really came to fruition and established itself in the Victorian times. So that this is when in the Victorian times sending notes, sending gifts became more known, especially sending cards.
Yeah.
So early Valentines usually took the form of handwritten notes or poems, and because in the 1800s, like the availability of paper became a lot more um easy, and the development of like printing techniques, it made Valentine's cards even bigger and even more easier to do. And Valentine's cards became a real artwork, a real art form, and a lot of them would incorporate like lace and intricate designs and intricate paper designs. And the Valentine industry grew, and up to 60,000 cards were sent in 1836.
That's a lot more than I'd expect for that kind of era. I mean, I didn't really think sort of like mass produced, I guess you could say, cards were common back then.
If there's one thing the Victorians loved, it was card. They loved a card.
You know.
And apparently this only increased in numbers with the invention of the penny post in 1840, which is pretty self-explanatory. You paid a penny to post something, and by 1886, so many cards were being sent for Valentine's Day that the post office had to issue a notice asking people to post them as early as possible to avoid delays and overload in the system. So the post also brought a sense of anonymity that hadn't been there before, which actually allowed more racy cards to be sent. So this is where Valentine's gets a little bit spicy.
Saucy.
A little bit saucy.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, that makes sense, I guess, because I feel like during the Victorian era, it was very common, well, even before then probably, but during the Victorian era, it was very common to, like, kind of send letters to people and be like, hey, do you want to get married? You know, it's a bit crazy nowadays, but yeah.
When I was doing my research, one of the kind of things I found I actually really made me laugh a little, just because it's kind of, I don't know, it's a bit iconic, not gonna lie, but as I said, because of that anonymity of being able to send a card and not know who it's from, really, and it allowed more kind of out of pocket racy cards for the time period to be sent. I think it was the V&A Museum where I saw this. They have a collection of Victorian Valentine's cards, and one of the cards in the collection, one of the racier ones, is where a lady's crinoline, which I'm assuming is her long skirt, can actually be raised like on the card to reveal a scandalous glimpse of red stockinged ankle. And I just love that. I love that so much. And this is something I've never heard of before, but it was a very British Valentine's Day custom in the Victorian times. Again, derived from the fact that you could now be anonymous and send these cards. It was the increased popularity of vinegar valentines. Have you ever heard of vinegar valentines?
Never, no.
So, vinegar valentines were Valentine's cards with vulgar or cruel messages designed to have the opposite effect of a traditional Valentine's Day card. So, this card from around 1860 would have been used for around like to send kind of a warning message to warn off a potential suitor, or perhaps like their lover or their partner was not really who they thought they were, and it's kind of a payback message. So they were usually printed really cheaply on thin paper, and I saw a fact that it says to add insult to injury, before the postal reforms, it was actually the receiver who would have to pay for the postage. So you'd get sent a card essentially telling you either you're not a very nice person or I don't want to be with you. And then not only that, not only to have this cheaply made, not very nice card that has a horrible message, you have to pay to receive it. You have to pay to receive such a message.
That is real hater energy, and I have to love it.
It's kind of iconic.
It
I
is.
feel like we should bring it
Yeah.
back.
I would definitely send a few.
um, but it does say like on the other end of the scale, these cards became bougie,
Mm.
and actually, there's several cards made by Eugene Rimmel, so the creator of Rimmel London. Well, yeah, the creator of Rimmel London, and he kind of diversified the cards. So he actually scented all his cards with perfume. And he also collaborated with artists to produce some really, really pretty cards. And this is kind of where like flowers comes into it because they started like a range of flower cards called the Language of Flowers collection, and each flower represented a different meaning. Um, so it became really, really popular, and these cards are beautiful. If you have chance, Google like Victorian Valentine's cards, especially like Rimmel, um, the brand Rimmel, because they're so beautiful. And men were known to spend up to a month's wages on buying the most elaborate cards to demonstrate their love. Can you imagine paying a month's wages to get a card?
No, I mean the concept of spending like what 2 grand on a card, absolutely not.
It's mental. And there's actually an even further kind of um offshoot of the cards where you could attach objects to the cards. So like garters, lace, and gloves. And apparently it was tradition that if a man gave a woman a glove on Valentine's Day and she wore it on Easter Sunday, it means she reciprocated his love. Which is very cute. There's a whole history of like actions and um like little, I don't know how to describe it, but like little messages and signs in Victorian like Britain that meant something. Like the way of a fan was like it meant this, or like if I wear this certain lace, like it means this. Very interesting. Um but yeah, this is kind of where the more modern day Valentine's Day stems from: the cards, the flowers, the gifts. Um so modern Valentine's Day is, it's often accused of being something called a Hallmark holiday, which is kind of a festivity, a holiday that's invented or at least perpetuated by companies just to sell things.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I would, before I knew any of this history, I would also say the same because even in a relationship, Valentine's Day just not bother me. Like, I don't think you need a day to celebrate your love. Maybe that's an unpopular opinion, or
No, I'd argue that's what your anniversary is for. I mean, my parents have been together for like 25 years and they do not care about Valentine's Day in the slightest. And yeah, I feel like it's become one of those where it has really nice origins or very specific origins. But it's become more of like a commercial thing, sort of like Christmas, I guess. And in the same way as well, I know that they do celebrate it in other countries. But I have no clue what other countries think the origins of it are. I don't know if they kind of know where it comes from. I didn't even know where it comes from, so it is interesting how things have changed.
yeah, I mean, I think the message of Valentine's Day, in the fact that it's like to celebrate love or to show off your love, maybe, is quite sweet. But I think it's just so commercialized because now, and I think it's the same with Christmas, like, people, it's just more so an opportunity to show how much money you can spend to try and outdo each other. And I don't think that's the meaning of love. Like, you don't need to spend so much money just to show that you love someone. Like, of course it's nice, but it's not like be all or end all. So in the UK, I don't think Valentine's Day is a very big holiday. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I've never particularly asked people I know in relationships if they do anything for it, but as far as I can tell, most of them don't. Or if they do, maybe they'll just have a nice dinner or something. But like, I feel like online you'll see a lot of people who are like, oh, my boyfriend bought me this, my girlfriend bought me this, and they'll like post it, and it's like, again, like you say, it's a very kind of like who can spend the most money, who can be the best partner kind of thing. It's become a bit of a competition, whereas I feel like anyone who's in a normal relationship doesn't really care about that, and it's just a thing between them two. But yeah, I would say I don't know how it is in America or other countries, but I don't really think it's as big of a thing here. I think the marketing really pushes it and really makes it seem like a big deal, but in reality, I don't think it is.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I don't think it's a very big thing in terms of commercially. Like here, yes, you'll have like maybe like half an aisle in the supermarket of Valentine's Day specific stuff. You'll see the roses outside, but I don't think it's as big here as it might be in like America or other countries. You know, you have the basics. You give chocolates or flowers, but even then, I don't think it's like like a set thing that you have to send those things. You know,
Yeah.
but I mean, with Valentine's Day, it is subjective. It depends from each couple, but I would say that that's the main thing. If like if you experience Valentine's Day in the UK, if you're not in a relationship, you will know no difference than if you are. Depending on the relationship, as I says, it's subjective, but I'd say like a card and some chocolates and some flowers is the main stuff. Very basic.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, I don't really think there's any sort of expectation placed on it. Like, there's a lot of couples I know who don't celebrate it. There's a lot I'm sure there's people I know who do. But either way, there's not a sort of set expectation of, okay, I need to do this specific thing. Like, I feel like Valentine's Day is associated with like chocolates or, like wine or something like that. There's sort of a very specific association with what you get people on Valentine's Day. But in reality, I don't think that expectation is very accurate. Like, I know one friend who's in a relationship, and I remember one year her boyfriend got her like a bracelet or something for Valentine's Day. So I really don't think it's a set expectation. I think every couple decides, okay, do we want to do this? How far do we want to go with it? But yeah, it's definitely not super serious, I'd say.
No. I think honestly, learning about the history of St. Valentine's Day, we should bring back the Victorian traditions,
I
like
agree.
the intricate and detailed, lovingly made cards, the small little like attachments. I think they're
Mm.
so cute, and I would rather receive a really thoughtful card than anything else. The wooden spoons.
I
I feel
agree.
like that Welsh tradition of the wooden spoons. I feel like we need to make that a thing.
Yeah, bring them back. I mean, even if you don't like the person, you've got a spoon, so what is there to dislike?
Yeah.
But I agree. I never knew about the origins of it, but hearing about how it was in Victorian times, it all sort of reminds me of like Pride and Prejudice. It's very sort of like I enjoy the subtlety of it. I enjoy the idea of like the signs, but it's not quite as explicit or obvious. I enjoy that, and I think we've lost a bit of that subtlety in the modern day, and I think
Yeah.
we should bring it back. I think it's very nice.
Well, I had a very enjoyable time researching this. Did you have? I had a really enjoyable time researching this because I'm a history nerd anyway. But there's so much like history to such a very simple thing that you don't realize. Did you find the history of it very interesting?
I did. I find it interesting, sort of how many different people were implicated in it in the beginning and how it changed over time. I also didn't realize it was such like a. I didn't realize the origins were so far like long ago. I thought it was more sort of like a maybe medieval thing, which in terms of the modern traditions, yeah, it kind of started a bit later. But in terms of like the supposed origins of it, I didn't realize it went back that far. So that was very interesting to me.
Well, we hope you guys found this podcast as interesting as we did researching it. If you celebrate Valentine's Day in your country, why don't you let us know in the comments? How do you celebrate it? Do you also gift flowers and cards and chocolates, or do you have something entirely different like wooden spoons? Um, so with that, I think we were going to wish you goodbye, and we'll see you guys in the next podcast. Bye.
Bye.